Wanted to help y'all out this year because I know that many of you are doing Seder alone for the first time. I know in previous years you probably hung out with relatives and went to someone else's Seder. Maybe you didn't even have to participate as a leader at all. And this year it may be just you. So I wanted to help out, give a basic tutorial over the next video or three to help you get a sense of what to do. It isn't that hard. The magic of a Haggadah is that it's pretty much usually laying it out step by step, but I did want to give you some basics to help you through it. Number one, the first rule of Pesach Seder. The first rule of Pesach Seder is that Pesach Seder is on Pesach. Now that may sound like a joke, may sound facetious, but it's not. Now why am I telling you that? Well, because those of you who live here in Atlanta, on the far western edge of the Eastern time zone, and are now currently living in about a few weeks after the clock has changed. So now we're looking at, when does the sun go down? When do the stars come out? The holidays in Judaism, as you know, all begin at the nighttime. And therefore, we have to wait until it is nighttime the first night of Pesach to get our first Seder going. Well, around here, this year, it looks like it's going to be around 8:41 p.m. So you can't really start your Seder until 8:41 p.m. at the earliest. So that's rule number one. It's not just around Pesach time, it's on Pesach. So it's a little difficult, and I recommend sometimes that certainly the kids should take a nap, the adults should take a nap if they need to. You know, depending on how late you expect your Seder to be. Get a little nosh in you, get some salad a little beforehand, or some potato chips before the meal starts, and so you're not starving. Anyway, so the other thing that comes up is prepping for the Seder, which would be setting up the table. So in front of the leader, you're usually going to have a stack of 3 matzahs, right? 3 matzahs stacked up with a cover on top of them. Well, you know, some standard fabric, or some people have a special matzah Passover thing. Doesn't matter if you don't have one. Just take 3 matzahs, stack them up, and put a towel over them, whatever you have. Just don't use the challah cover from the rest of the year with all the crumbs on it, you know. Anyway. So that's that, and also on the table in front of the leader, or near the leader, or somewhere on the table, will be the Seder plate. The Seder plate has a number of symbolic things that we use during the Seder, some which we use, some which we don't use, but they're all symbolic, and most Haggadahs at the beginning of the Haggadah will have an image or a photograph of what that looks like. You can look it up online as well. Let me just show you what I have here. So that there had all the Hebrew words. There are 6 items. The beitzah, which means the egg. And the way you do that egg is you get a hard-boiled egg and you roast it a little bit in the oven so it gets a little brown on the outside. And you place that on there. That's commemorative of one of the sacrifices that comes with the holiday. We're not going to do anything with that egg during the holiday. It's just symbolic. The next thing on the right of that is the zroa, which means the shank bone. And for those of you that don't have lambs around to get a lamb shank, well, first of all, Kosher Gourmet does have them. When I grew up, it was always a chicken drumstick. You know, something made of meat with a bone in it that's roasted. So you just take that in aluminum, stick it in the oven. It doesn't need to be spiced or flavored or anything. It's symbolic. It's there for show. And until it looks good and toasty. And take it out, put it aside, and save it for the Seder and put it on your Seder plate. Then you're going to have 2 types of maror on your plate. One of them is the leafy maror, which different people use different things. Romaine, endive, things like that. Whatever your custom is. And then there's the real maror, which is horseradish. You know, whatever you can find. Now keep in mind, I want to mention something important, which is that when it comes to the mitzvah of eating maror on Pesach, many people don't realize that you cannot fulfill that with jarred prepared maror, jarred prepared horseradish with vinegar. You can't fulfill the commandment to eat maror with anything that's been pickled or altered in any way. So if you're going to use horseradish, you get the horseradish root, and you peel it, and I highly recommend shredding it as well. Do not eat it like a carrot. You don't want to be gasping on the floor. For those of you, everyone's got one of them uncles that's like, y'all don't know how this is done, and takes a big old chomp out of that horseradish and turns beet red. Well, you don't have to be that guy. And in fact, you can fulfill the entire commandment of eating maror without eating any horseradish. If you just prefer the lettuce version, you can take the horseradish version and shred some, or even take a chunk and put it on your Seder plate and look at it and wave at it and say, hey, what's going on? You don't have to actually eat it. So on your Seder plate again, you've got those two types of maror. Then you've also got charoses. So charoses is the thing that is, looks a little bit like, well, it's symbolic of mud, symbolic of the mortar used in building in Egypt. There are different recipes for it. You can Google them. I don't know the Sephardic recipe. I know it involves dried fruit, and it sounds delicious. The Ashkenazic version is chopped apples, a little bit of wine, a little bit of cinnamon, and some chopped walnuts. At least that's the one we do. There's not a lot of technical details. It's not like if you put the wrong nut in there, or there's no such thing as there's too much wine, too little wine. This is not a halachic thing in the sense of what the right recipe is, as long as it's generically that, looks a little brown, made of fruit, looks a little pasty. There's your charoses. So, but if you need recipes, they're online. They're easy to make. And the last thing you're going to have is your karpas. Now, karpas is something you will use during the Seder. Again, you don't have to use the things that are on the Seder plate during the Seder. You could, for the charoses that you're going to use during the Seder, you can just have a separate bowl. For the karpas that you're going to use, you could have a separate bowl. This is just here for the symbolism and the visuals. It doesn't have to be touched at all during the Seder. So the karpas is the vegetable that we're going to dip in the salt water later during the Seder. And what vegetable do you use? The answer is there's all types. When I grew up, it was only celery. I didn't know that anyone used anything but celery. As it turns out, we're in the minority. People use parsley. People use potatoes. People use all sorts of things. You can actually technically use any vegetable as long as it's not the type you can use for maror. So, but I would recommend you just go with whatever your family custom is. That's about it. Parsley is a little problematic because you have to check it for bugs because it's kind of leafy, and look up how to do that. But if that's your custom, then go ahead. And that's your Seder plate. So get that all ready before Pesach. Maybe even the morning before the Seder. That could just be ready to go, sitting on the table. That's totally fine. So once you've got your 3 matzahs, you got your Seder plate, go ahead, set the table, set out the haggadahs, set out the cups, and we're almost ready to start.